He had control of an empire, but not of his own life. An unexpected clause in his father's will put Ethan against time: marry or lose everything. But what was meant to be a cold agreement became a dangerous game of secrets, betrayals, and a love that could change everything. Are you ready for this story? Ethan Morgan observed the city of New York through the window of his office, on the top floor of the building that housed his family's financial empire headquarters. At 35, he had dedicated his entire life to business, transforming the already prosperous Morgan Bank into an even greater powerhouse in the financial market. His reflection in the mirrored glass showed a man with striking features, impeccably styled dark hair, and an Italian suit that cost more than many of his employees earned in a month. The sound of the door opening pulled him from his thoughts. Evelyn Morgan, his mother, entered the room with the characteristic elegance of someone born and raised among New York's high society. At 60, she maintained a proud posture and a penetrating gaze that few dared to challenge. "Ethan, we need to talk about the will clause," she said, sitting down in one of the leather armchairs. He sighed deeply, turning to face his mother. His father's will, Richard Morgan, had become his biggest concern in recent months. The requirement of a marriage to access the inheritance seemed like a bad joke. "There's nothing to discuss, Mom. This clause is absurd, and my lawyers are working to contest it," he replied, his voice maintaining the controlled tone he used in difficult negotiations. Evelyn adjusted the pearl necklace around her neck, a gesture that Ethan knew well. His mother always did this when she was about to say something he wouldn't like to hear. "You know, there's no way to contest it. Your father was very clear and meticulous in drafting the will. If you don't get married within the next year, you'll lose not only the inheritance, but also control of the bank." Ethan poured himself a glass of whiskey, trying to contain the irritation growing in his chest. "And what do you suggest? That I marry the first woman who comes along? Turn my life into a farce because of a ridiculous requirement?" A discreet smile appeared on Evelyn's lips. "Actually, dear, I already have a solution. I've found the perfect candidate." The glass stopped halfway to Ethan's mouth. "What do you mean?" "Olivia Taylor, 28 years old, business administration graduate, works as a manager in a department store. No scandals, no previous public relationships, simple but structured family, and most importantly, she's willing to make a deal." Ethan put the glass on the table with more force than necessary. "A deal? Are you suggesting that I have an arranged marriage?" "I'm suggesting that you be pragmatic, as you've always been in business. 1 year of marriage, she receives a generous financial compensation. You keep your inheritance and control of the bank. Afterwards, a discreet divorce, and each goes their separate way." Silence took over the room as Ethan processed the proposal. His analytical mind was already calculating the pros and cons, as he did with every important decision in his life. "I want to meet her first," he finally said. Evelyn smiled, satisfied. "I've already scheduled a dinner for tonight, the Gramercy Tavern at 8 p.m. On the other side of the city, in a small apartment in Brooklyn, Olivia Taylor was trying to choose the right outfit for what would probably be the most important dinner of her life. Her modest wardrobe seemed even more inadequate when she thought about the refined environment where she would meet her possible future husband. Her younger sister, Sophie, watched from the bed, playing distractedly with one of the few dresses Olivia owned. "Are you sure about this, Liv? Marrying a stranger?" Olivia stopped in front of the mirror, adjusting the black dress she had bought especially for the occasion. It was simple but elegant enough not to embarrass her. "It's not like I have much choice, Soph. The treatment is our priority now, and with my salary—" Her voice faltered for a moment. "Besides, it's just for a year. The money they offered would solve all our problems." What Olivia didn't tell her sister was the weight of guilt she was already beginning to feel, not just for the farce she was about to enact, but mainly for the secret she was keeping. The marriage proposal hadn't come by chance. It was part of a much larger plan, orchestrated by someone Olivia didn't even know personally. Looking at herself one last time in the mirror, Olivia tried to push these thoughts away. She needed to focus on the role she had to play, a simple but educated woman with no great ambitions beyond a comfortable life. the type of person who would pose no threat to the Morgan family. The taxi dropped her off in front of the Gramercy Tavern precisely at 8 p.m. The doorman led her to the main dining room, where Evelyn Morgan was already waiting. The family matriarch stood up to greet her, evaluating every detail of her appearance with critical eyes. "Olivia, dear, I'm glad you could come. Ethan is on his way," said Evelyn, indicating the chair. Beside her, Olivia sat down, trying to control the trembling in her hands. The restaurant was even more intimidating than she had imagined, with its crystal chandeliers and silver cutlery. Every detail screamed wealth and power, a world completely different from hers. The moment she both feared and longed for finally arrived. Ethan Morgan entered the restaurant, and his presence immediately altered the atmosphere of the environment. Tall, elegant, and with an air of natural authority, he was even more impressive than in the photos Olivia had seen. When their eyes met for the first time, Olivia felt something that wasn't in the plans, butterflies in her stomach, an instant connection that scared her. For a brief moment, all the lies and agreements seemed to disappear, and she was just a woman meeting a man. But reality soon imposed itself again. This wasn't a romantic encounter. It was a business, a transaction like any other. And Olivia had a role to play, a role that she didn't know yet would change her life forever. The dinner proceeded in a tense silence, broken only by the clinking of cutlery and occasional comments from Evelyn about the menu. Olivia kept her eyes fixed on her plate of risotto, aware of Ethan's penetrating gaze upon her. He hadn't said more than half a dozen words since sitting at the table, but his presence was so striking that it made the air almost unbreathable. "So, Olivia," Ethan's voice finally cut through the silence, "my mother tells me you work as a store manager." "Yes," she answered, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "At Bloomingdale's, for 3 years now." "A department store," he commented, his neutral tone not revealing whether he considered this good or bad. "And why did you accept this game proposal?" Evelyn cleared her throat, clearly uncomfortable with her son's direct approach, but Olivia was prepared for this question. "Out of necessity," she responded with honesty, at least partial. "I have a younger sister who needs special medical care. The treatment is expensive and my salary barely covers our basic expenses." Ethan took a sip of wine, studying her over the rim of his glass. "And you don't see an ethical problem with an arranged marriage?" "Ethan," Evelyn intervened, but Olivia raised her hand, signaling that she could answer. "I see as many ethical problems as you do, Mr. Morgan, but sometimes we need to make difficult choices for those we love. Aren't you doing exactly the same for your company and your family?" A flash of surprise crossed Ethan's face, quickly replaced by a discreet smile. It was the first time he had shown anything beyond coldness since he arrived. "Touché," he murmured, "and you can call me Ethan. If we're going to get married, even if for convenience, I think we can dispense with formalities." The rest of the dinner flowed more naturally. Ethan asked about her education in business administration, and Olivia talked about her years at the public university, the nights studying while working as a sales associate, the promotion to manager that she had celebrated so much. She noticed that he was analyzing her, not just as a future facade wife, but as an investment, assessing risks, calculating variables. When dessert was served, Evelyn decided it was time to discuss the practical terms of the agreement. "The wedding needs to happen within 2 months," she explained, her voice low and controlled. "It will be a small ceremony, just family and close friends. You'll live together in Ethan's penthouse in the Upper East Side to keep up appearances. After a year, you can divorce discreetly." "And the financial compensation?" Ethan asked, direct as always. $2 million, Evelyn answered. $1 million now, another after the divorce. Additionally, all of Olivia's expenses during the marriage period will be covered. Olivia felt her heart race. It was much more money than she had initially imagined. With that amount, she could not only pay for Sophie's treatment, but also secure their future. "And what about public appearances?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "You'll need to attend some social and corporate events together," Evelyn explained. "Nothing excessive, just enough not to raise suspicions. And naturally, you'll need to be discreet in your personal relationships during this period. Ethan remained silent, twirling the wine glass between his fingers. Olivia could sense that he still had doubts, still looking for flaws in the plan. "I need to think," he said finally. "I can't make a decision of this magnitude in the heat of the moment." Evelyn opened her mouth to protest, but Ethan interrupted her with a gesture. "Give me 24 hours, Mom. It's a reasonable request." After Evelyn excused herself to make a call, Ethan and Olivia found themselves alone for the first time. The silence between them had a different weight now, loaded with unasked questions and unspoken answers. "Why you?" he asked suddenly. "Among all the women my mother could choose, why you?" Olivia felt her heart skip a beat. It was the perfect moment to tell the truth, to reveal that the choice hadn't been Evelyn's, but the words got stuck in her throat, choked by fear and guilt. "Maybe because I have nothing to lose," she answered, opting for a half-truth. "Or maybe because your mother knows I have no ambitions beyond the promised money." Ethan studied her for a long moment, as if trying to see beyond her words. "You're different from what I expected," he finally admitted. "More real." Before Olivia could respond, Evelyn returned to the table. The moment of intimacy dissipated like smoke, but left a trail that neither of them could completely ignore. In the taxi back home, Olivia finally let the tears fall. Guilt consumed her from within, not just for the farce of the marriage, but mainly for what she knew was to come. The plan was bigger and more complex than a simple financial agreement, and she was just a piece in a game whose rules she didn't fully know. In her apartment in Brooklyn, she found Sophie asleep on the couch, surrounded by college textbooks. Her sister dreamed of becoming a doctor, and Olivia would do anything to make that dream come true, even become part of a conspiracy that could destroy the life of a man who, surprisingly, didn't seem to be the cold and calculating monster they had described. Her cell phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "Everything is in motion. Don't deviate from the plan." Olivia deleted the message immediately, as she had been instructed to do. Lying in her bed, looking at the peeling ceiling of her room, she wondered if she would ever be able to forgive herself for what she was about to do. The money would solve her financial problems, but at what cost to her conscience? On the other side of the city, in his luxurious penthouse, Ethan was also awake, mentally reviewing every detail of the dinner. There was something about Olivia that intrigued him, a vulnerability mixed with strength that seemed too genuine to be an act. But years of business experience had taught him never to trust first impressions. He picked up his cell phone and typed a message to his private investigator. "I want everything on Olivia Taylor, every detail of the last 10 years of her life, especially her connections to my family." The die was cast. In 24 hours, both would have to make decisions that would change their lives forever. What neither of them knew was that much greater. Forces had already set this story in motion, long before that dinner at the Gramercy Tavern. He studied her for a moment before responding. "Morgan Bank isn't just a business for me. It's my family's legacy built over generations. I can't risk losing it because of a whim of my father's. Even if it means marrying a stranger?" "You're not exactly a stranger," he replied, his intense gaze fixed on her. "At least not after the thorough investigation I did into your life." Olivia felt her blood run cold. "You investigated me?" "Naturally, don't be offended. It's how I do business. I need to know all the risks before closing a deal." "And what did you find out?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "That you are exactly who you say you are, which ironically only increased my curiosity." The rest of the evening passed between discussions about practical details and small moments of mutual discovery. Ethan, Olivia realized, wasn't just the cold, executive he appeared to be. There were flashes of humor in his comments, a sharp intelligence in his observations. At one point, he took her to see the rest of the apartment. The tour ended in the library, an impressive room with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "This is my refuge," Ethan commented, running his fingers over some book spines. "When the business world gets too heavy, I come here." Olivia approached one of the shelves, surprised to find some of her favorite authors. "You read Garcia Marquez?" "Love. In the Time of Cholera is one of my favorites," he replied, a genuine smile lighting up his face for the first time. "Impressed?" "I confess I am. I didn't imagine you'd be a fan of magical realism." "There are many things about me you don't imagine," he said, his voice softly provocative. For a moment, their gazes met, and something indefinable passed between them. Olivia was the first to look away, aware of the danger of that moment. "It's getting late, I think I'd better go." Back at her apartment, Olivia found Sophie still awake, studying for a test. "How did it go?" her sister asked, without taking her eyes off the book. "It's done," Olivia replied simply, letting herself fall onto the couch. "In a month, I'll be married." Sophie finally looked up, concern evident on her face. "Liv, you don't have to do this. We can figure something out, we always have." "No, Soph. This time we need more than just figuring something out." Olivia forced a smile. "Besides, it's not as bad as I imagined. Ethan is interesting." "Interesting how?" "Complex. There's more to him than that arrogant executive facade." Sophie closed the book, looking at her sister seriously. "Liv, don't fall in love. This is a business deal, remember?" "I know," Olivia responded quickly, too quickly. "Of course I know." Later, lying in her bed, Olivia reread the last message received from the mysterious number. "Maintain emotional distance. Don't get involved." The problem, she realized now, was that it might be too late for that advice. Something was growing in her heart, something that wasn't in the plans, and that could complicate everything. And worse, she was beginning to suspect that she wasn't the only one involved in this dangerous game of lies and manipulations. In his own apartment, Ethan was also awake, mentally reviewing every moment of the night. There was something about Olivia that intrigued him more and more, an authenticity that seemed to contradict the artificial nature of their agreement. He picked up his cell phone and typed a message to his investigator. "Continue monitoring. I want to know about any suspicious communication." What he didn't know was that his own suspicions were about to lead him down a much more complex path than he imagined. The next few weeks would change not only his life, but his understanding of trust, love, and betrayal. The 3 weeks leading up to the wedding passed like a whirlwind. Evelyn had taken command of the preparations with military efficiency, transforming what should have been a discreet ceremony into a meticulously orchestrated event for New York's high society. "We need to make it look authentic," she always insisted whenever Olivia or Ethan questioned the need for so much pomp. Too simple a wedding would raise suspicions. Olivia found herself immersed in a world she knew only from movies, dress fittings at the most exclusive bridal boutique in the city, meetings with renowned decorators, tastings at starred restaurants. Amidst all this luxury, she felt increasingly like an imposter. "You're very quiet," observed Carla, her assistant, during lunch at Bloomingdale's. "Is the wedding making you nervous?" Olivia forced a smile. "It's a lot to process." "I can imagine. I mean, 2 months ago you were just the store manager, and now you're about to marry one of New York's most eligible bachelors. It's like a modern fairy tale." "Yeah, something like that," Olivia murmured, her stomach twisting with guilt. Her phone vibrated. Another message from the unknown number. "Meeting today, 3 p.m. Central Park near the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Come alone." It was the first time her mysterious contact had requested a face-to-face meeting. Olivia felt a shiver of apprehension run down her spine. On the other side of the city, Ethan was in his office when Jack Sanders, his private investigator, entered, without being announced, a privilege his years of service guaranteed him. "I found something interesting," Jack said, placing an envelope on the desk. "In the last 3 weeks, Olivia has been receiving regular messages from an untraceable number." Ethan opened the envelope, finding photos of Olivia checking her cell phone at different times and places. "Did you manage to intercept any messages?" "No, she deletes them systematically right after reading. But today," Jack made a dramatic pause, "she received a meeting request. Central Park, 3 p.m. Ethan looked at the clock, 2:30 p.m. "Send someone to monitor discreetly. I've already arranged it. Do you want me to go personally?" No, I don't want to scare whoever is behind this. Just observe and record. When Jack left, Ethan remained in his office, torn between professional distrust and a more personal feeling he didn't want to admit. In the past few weeks, his interactions with Olivia had become complicated. There were moments during the dinners they shared to keep up appearances, in meetings with the wedding organizers, in casual conversations about books in the library, when he found himself forgetting that it was all just a business agreement. Olivia had a way of making even the most artificial situations seem natural. In Central Park, Olivia walked nervously near the designated location. The day was surprisingly warm for that time of year, but it wasn't just the heat that was making her sweat. Miss Taylor. The voice made her turn. A middle-aged man, wearing an impeccable suit, was sitting on one of the benches. He seemed strangely familiar, although she was sure she had never seen him before. "Please sit down," he indicated the space beside him. "We have much to discuss." Olivia obeyed, her heart beating fast. "You are someone with interests aligned with yours," he interrupted her softly. "The name isn't important. What matters is that you're doing an excellent job. Evelyn is completely convinced that the plan was her idea." "Evelyn," Olivia felt her stomach sink. "So she didn't—" "No, she's just another piece on the board, just like you and Ethan." The man smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But you're doing much better than we expected. Ethan seems genuinely interested." Olivia felt her face burn. "I'm just following the plan." "Of course you are." His tone suggested he didn't fully believe it. "But I need to remind you of the ultimate goal. After the wedding, you'll have access to privileged information. Documents, conversations, bank routines. We need all of that." "For what?" Olivia finally gathered the courage to ask. "Why so much interest in Morgan Bank?" The man studied her for a moment before answering. "Let's just say there are certain irregularities that need to come to light, and you, my dear, are our gateway. And if I don't want to participate anymore—" His smile turned icy. "Your sister still needs that experimental treatment in Switzerland, doesn't she? It would be a shame if something happened to her spot at the clinic." The veiled threat made Olivia feel as if all the air had been sucked from her lungs. "You wouldn't do that." "Don't test me, Miss Taylor. Just follow the plan and everyone will come out winning." He stood up, adjusting his jacket. "Oh, and one more thing. Keep your feelings under control. We don't want the heart to interfere with business, do we?" After he left, Olivia remained on the bench, trembling despite the heat. For the first time, she realized the true extent of the trap she had gotten herself into. It wasn't just her life or Sophie's that was at stake. There was something much bigger in motion. At night, during dinner in Ethan's penthouse, something that had become a habit in recent weeks, she could barely look him in the eye. Each gesture of kindness from him, each smile, each moment of genuine connection was like a stab in her heart. "Is everything okay?" Ethan asked, noticing her distant behavior. "You seem worried." Olivia forced a smile. "Just tired. The wedding preparations, work. It's been crazy." "We can postpone if you want," he offered, his voice surprisingly gentle. "It doesn't have to be now." "No," she responded too quickly. "I mean, everything's already organized. Your mother would kill us if we changed plans now." Ethan laughed, but his eyes remained serious, studying her. "You know, Olivia, sometimes I wonder—" "What?" "If in some parallel universe we would have met in another way, without agreements, without pressures, without—" He made a vague gesture with his hand. "All this pretense." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. And what would happen in that universe? Maybe— He leaned slightly towards her. Things would be simpler, more real. For a moment, the air between them seemed charged with electricity. Olivia could feel the heat from his body, see the details of his eyes, notice the exact moment when his gaze dropped to her lips. It would be so easy to lean forward, to let it happen. The shrill sound of her cell phone broke the moment. It was a message, the same unknown number. "Remember our agreement." Olivia stood up abruptly. "I need to go. I have Some things from the store I need to sort out early tomorrow." Ethan didn't try to stop her, but she could feel his gaze following her to the elevator. When the doors closed, she finally let the tears fall. In his office, after Olivia left, Ethan was receiving Jack's report on the meeting in the park. "We couldn't get audio, but we took photos of the man. We're cross-referencing his face with our databases." Ethan nodded, looking at the photo on his computer. Something about the man seemed familiar, but he couldn't pinpoint what. "Keep investigating. I want to know who he is before the wedding." After Jack left, Ethan remained in his office, contemplating the city through the window. His instinct told him there was something very wrong with this story, but for the first time in his life, his heart was coming into conflict with his reason. "What game are you caught up in, Olivia?" he murmured to himself, observing the city lights. "And why do I increasingly have the feeling that you're also a victim in it?" On the eve of the wedding, Ethan's penthouse was unrecognizable. White flowers occupied every available surface. A team of decorators circulated, adjusting the final details for the party that would happen there after the ceremony at the church. Evelyn supervised everything with eagle eyes, ensuring that every detail was perfect for what she insisted on, calling the event of the year. Olivia observed all that movement from the terrace, feeling completely out of place. In less than 24 hours, she would officially be Olivia Morgan. The thought made her feel nauseous. "I thought I'd find you here." Ethan's voice surprised her. He approached, offering her a glass of champagne. "Is my mother driving you crazy too?" "Your mother. Care's intense," Olivia replied, accepting the drink. "That's a polite way of saying she's controlling." He leaned on the terrace railing next to her, their shoulders almost touching. "But that's not what's bothering you, is it?" Olivia took a sip of champagne to buy time. In recent weeks, Ethan had developed an irritating ability to read her emotions. "It's normal to be nervous," she tried to deflect. "Olivia." The way he said her name made her shiver. "Look at me." She obeyed reluctantly. His eyes studied her with that intensity that had become familiar and disturbing. "If you want to give up," he said softly, "there's still time." Her heart raced. "Fauci, you want to give up?" "That's not what I asked." Before Olivia could respond, her cell phone vibrated. Another message. "Last chance to prove your loyalty. Don't risk it." "I can't," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Ethan frowned, clearly frustrated with her evasive answer. In recent weeks, he had tried several times to understand what really motivated Olivia, but she always dodged, building invisible walls between them just when they seemed to be closest. "You know what's strange?" he commented, swirling his own glass of champagne. "The more I try to understand you, the more mysterious you become." Olivia felt her stomach sink. "There's no mystery at all. I'm exactly who you investigated me to be." "Yes, you are." He turned to face her completely. "And that's precisely what doesn't make sense. Nobody is that perfect." "Perfect?" She laughed humorlessly. "I'm anything but perfect." "For this role, you are." He took a step towards her. "The ideal candidate for an arranged marriage. No scandals, no complications, just convenient." "Isn't that what you wanted?" She tried to keep her voice steady, but she could feel tears forming. "What I want." He raised his hand as if to touch her face, but stopped halfway. "What I want and what I can have are very different things, aren't they?" The moment was interrupted by Evelyn, who appeared on the terrace like a hurricane of energy and elegance. "Ah, good thing I found you too. Olivia, dear, we need to do the final dress fitting. And Ethan, the lawyers are here for the final review. Curve the contracts." They separated like teenagers caught in the act, although they weren't doing anything beyond talking. Olivia followed Evelyn inside, feeling Ethan's gaze on her back. Night came too quickly. Olivia was in her apartment for the last time. Tomorrow, after the ceremony, she would officially move into the penthouse. Sophie watched her pack with evident concern on her face. "Liv," her sister began hesitantly, "are you sure you don't want to tell me what's really going on?" Olivia stopped folding a blouse, surprised. What are you talking about? I'm not an idiot. These mysterious messages you receive, your lost looks, the times I catch you crying when you think I'm asleep. Sophie approached, taking her sister's hands. This is more than a simple marriage agreement, isn't it? For a moment, Olivia considered telling everything. About the threats, about the plan, about the mysterious man in the park. Her sister deserved to know the truth. But then her cell phone vibrated again, as if fate itself was reminding her of what was at stake. "Soph," she forced a smile, "it's just wedding nerves. I promise everything's fine." On the other side of the city, Ethan was in his library, an untouched glass of whiskey in front of him. Jack had just left after delivering his latest report. "The man from the park," Jack had said, "we got a partial identification. He has connections to a consulting firm that attempted a hostile takeover of Morgan Bank 5 years ago." "Before? My father's illness," Ethan murmured. "Exactly. The attempt failed, but there were rumors at the time that they had discovered something compromising about the bank's operations." Ethan picked up the glass but didn't drink. His mind was working at 1,000 miles an hour, connecting dots. "And Olivia, what's her connection to all this?" Jack hesitated. "We still don't know. But there's something interesting. 3 months before your mother found Olivia, there was a significant transfer to the account of the clinic where her sister is being treated. The origin of the money is nebulous." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling a headache forming. Part of him wanted to continue investigating, to discover the whole truth before it was too late. But another part, a part he didn't want to examine too closely, feared what he might discover. Because in recent weeks something had changed. What started as a business agreement had turned into something more complex, more dangerous. He had begun to see beyond Olivia's facade, to know the woman behind the role she was playing, or thought she was playing. And the scariest part, he had begun to care. His cell phone rang. It was his mother, probably with some last-minute detail about the wedding. But before he could answer, he noticed an email that had just arrived. The sender was anonymous, but the subject made him freeze. "The truth about Olivia Taylor. Open before the wedding." Ethan stared at the screen for a long moment, his finger hovering over the link. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he locked the phone without opening the email. Tomorrow, he thought, would be a long day, and something told him that the wedding would be just the beginning of a much more complex story than any of them imagined. The day dawned perfectly sunny, as if even the weather conspired for the spectacle that Evelyn had orchestrated. St. Patrick's Cathedral was decorated with a discreet elegance that still screamed luxury in every detail. White orchids cascaded. Down the historic pews, scented candles created an ethereal atmosphere, and a string quartet tuned their instruments at the altar. In the apartment specially prepared for the bride to get ready, Olivia observed her reflection in the mirror, while the beauty team gave the final touches. The dress was an exclusive Vera Wang, a gift from Evelyn. "We can't risk anything less than perfect," she had insisted. The delicate fabric hugged her curves before opening into a moderate train, and the back neckline was covered by delicate lacework. "You look stunning!" Sophie exclaimed, her eyes shining with contained tears. Olivia tried to smile, but her reflection showed eyes too haunted for a bride on her big day. Her cell phone, silent all morning, finally vibrated. "Everything ready. Don't forget your role today. After the ceremony, look for the blue folder in his office." Her hands trembled so much she almost dropped the phone. The reality of what she was about to do, of what she was forced to do, hit her with full force. "Liv?" Sophie approached, worried. "You're pale? Olivia took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. "I think I need a minute alone." As soon as everyone left the room, she ran to the bathroom and vomited, her stomach rebelling against the weight of guilt. When she stood up, her legs were so shaky she had to lean on the sink. "Please," she whispered to her reflection, "please forgive me for what I'm about to do." On the other side of the city, in the penthouse, Ethan adjusted the tie of his Italian tuxedo while Jack, his investigator, made his last report before the ceremony. "The anonymous email came from a server in Europe," he explained. "We're still trying to trace the exact origin." "And the content?" "Since you didn't open it, we don't know." Do you want me to?" "No," Ethan interrupted. "Not today." Jack studied him with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Can I make a personal observation? Since when do you ask permission? You're different. This whole situation with Olivia, it's affecting your judgment." Ethan turned to face his longtime friend. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "That may be." Jack chose his words carefully. "You're developing real feelings for someone who might be involved in a conspiracy against your family. Or maybe she's as much a victim as I am in this story. And if she's not?" Ethan didn't respond immediately. He walked to the window, observing the city awakening under the morning sun. "A few months ago, I would have investigated every detail, opened every email, unraveled every mystery before taking a step forward. But now, I don't know if I want to know the whole truth." The comment hung in the air, heavy with implications. Jack, after a moment of hesitation, left an envelope on the table. "What's this?" "The result of the investigation into that transfer to the clinic. If you want to know the truth, it's all there." Jack walked to the door but stopped before leaving. "Just remember, sometimes a broken heart today is better than a destroyed life tomorrow." At the cathedral, guests were starting to arrive. The cream of New York society, powerful executives, influential politicians. Evelyn circulated among them like a queen in her kingdom, accepting congratulations and ensuring everything was perfect. When Ethan arrived, accompanied by his best man, a childhood friend who was now a bank director, the murmurs of admiration were audible. He looked impressive in his tuxedo, his usual impeccable posture only slightly betrayed by a subtle tension in his shoulders. The string quartet began to play Pachelbel's Canon in D, signaling the imminent arrival of the bride. Ethan positioned himself at the altar, his heart beating in a way that had nothing to do with the act he was about to perform. The cathedral doors opened and Olivia appeared beside her father. A collective gasp ran through the church. She was stunning, ethereal, like a vision in white and lace. But when her eyes met Ethan's, both saw beyond appearances. In that moment, connected by their gaze across the nave of the cathedral, they shared the same devastating thought. At some point, what had begun as a farce had transformed into something real. And now, trapped in their own web of lies and secrets, they walked towards a destiny that neither had the courage to avoid. Olivia advanced down the aisle as if in a dream, each step taking her closer to a man she was destined to betray, but whom her heart stubbornly wanted to protect. Ethan watched her approach, torn between the desire to uncover the truth and the fear of what that truth might destroy. When their hands finally met at the altar, the touch was like an electric current. For a brief moment, the outside world disappeared. There was no conspiracy, no agreement, no threats. There were only the two of them, trapped in a moment of truth amidst an ocean of lies. "You look beautiful," he whispered, and the sincerity in his voice made her eyes fill with tears. The priest began the ceremony, his solemn voice echoing through the cathedral. While the traditional words of the ritual were pronounced, a silent battle was being fought in the hearts of the bride and groom. Olivia thought about the blue folder she would need to search for, the veiled threats against her sister, the point of no return she had chosen. Ethan thought about the envelope left by Jack, the unopened email, the pieces of the puzzle he refused to put together. If anyone knows of any impediment to this marriage, speak now, or forever hold your peace. The silence that followed seemed deafening to both of them. Each carried enough secrets to prevent 10 marriages, but neither had the courage to speak them. When the time came for the vows, their voices trembled for reasons that none of the guests could suspect. Each promise of love and fidelity was simultaneously a lie and a truth. A lie for the agreement that united them, truth for the feelings that had grown against all odds. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." The kiss that sealed the union was brief, contained, appropriate for the occasion. But the trembling in both their hands, the shine in their eyes, the accelerated breathing, everything betrayed emotions much deeper than anyone should feel in a marriage of convenience. As they walked back down the aisle of the church, now as Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, both knew they had just begun a journey much more complex than a simple business agreement. In the next few hours, decisions would have to be made, secrets would be revealed, and the fragile balance between truth and lie would begin to crumble. The party awaited them at the penthouse, but before that, there was a blue folder waiting to be found and a sealed envelope waiting to be read. The fate of both, and of everyone involved in this plot, would depend on the choices they would make that night. The wedding reception was in full swing at the Morgan penthouse. Champagne flowed freely, the orchestra played jazz standards, and guests circulated among the impeccably decorated tables, commenting on how perfect everything was. Evelyn shone like a star, receiving compliments for the flawless organization of the event. Olivia, however, could barely concentrate on the conversations and congratulations. Her eyes constantly drifted to the hallway leading to Ethan's office. The blue folder mentioned in the message seemed to be calling her, like a ticking time bomb waiting to explode. "Is everything okay?" Ethan asked, appearing at her side with 2 glasses of champagne. "You seem distracted." "Just tired," she forced a smile, accepting the drink. "It's been an intense day." He studied her for a moment, his eyes searching for something in her face. "Want to take a break? We could escape to the library for a few minutes." The suggestion was tempting. In recent weeks, the library had become their shared refuge, the only place where they could be something close to authentic with each other. But the blue folder... "Actually," she began hesitantly, "I need to go. To the restroom to touch up my makeup." Ethan nodded, but something in his eyes suggested he didn't fully believe her excuse. As soon as she walked away, he made a discreet signal to Jack, who was observing everything from a corner. Olivia managed to slip away from the party without drawing attention, taking advantage of a moment when everyone was distracted by the start of the newlyweds' waltz. The office was dark and silent, a stark contrast to the joy of the celebration. Her hands trembled as she searched for the blue folder. The message hadn't specified exactly where it would be, and the office was larger than she had imagined. Drawers, cabinets, shelves, where... Looking for something specific. Ethan's voice made her freeze. He was standing in the doorway, his face partially shadowed, impossible to read. I just... she stammered, her heart pounding in her chest. "The blue folder, perhaps?" He walked to his desk and turned on the lamp, revealing a brown envelope on the polished surface. "Or maybe you're more interested in this." Olivia felt her legs weaken. "What are you talking about?" "You know what's in this envelope, Olivia." He picked it up but didn't open it. The proof that everything, our meeting, the agreement, this wedding was carefully orchestrated. The question is, by whom? Tears began to stream down her face, smudging her perfect makeup. "Ethan, I can explain." "Can you really?" His voice was controlled, but there was an underlying tension she had never heard before. "Can you explain? Why a mysterious transfer was made to the clinic where your sister is being treated 3 months before my mother coincidentally found you? Can you explain your secret meetings in the park? The messages you obsessively delete? You followed me." "I'm a businessman, Olivia. Precaution is my way of life." He took a step towards her. What I didn't expect was for this to become so personal. The last word came out almost as a whisper, loaded with unspoken meanings. Olivia felt her heart break a little more. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she managed to say between sobs. "At first it was just an agreement. But then I really got to know you and everything changed." "What changed exactly? The plan to destroy me?" "No." She moved towards him, desperate to make him understand. "I never wanted to destroy you. They have something against my sister. Her treatment, her spot at the clinic, they threatened everything." Ethan went very still. "They who?" Before Olivia could answer, a voice sounded from the door. "What a touching scene." Both turned. Evelyn was standing at the entrance to the office, a cold smile on her perfectly painted lips. "Mother?" Ethan frowned. "What are you doing here?" "Ensuring nothing goes wrong, darling, as I've always done." She entered the office, gently closing the door behind her. "Olivia, dear, you're late. The folder should have been found 20 minutes ago." Olivia paled. Ethan looked from his mother to his now wife, understanding beginning to dawn in his eyes. "It was you," he said, his voice laden with disbelief. "You're behind all of this." "Don't be dramatic, Ethan. I'm just protecting our interests." "Our interests?" He laughed humorlessly. "You arranged my marriage, threatened an innocent young woman, all for what? Because your father was a sentimental fool who almost destroyed everything we built." Evelyn's composure finally broke. "That ridiculous clause in the will. He really believed forcing you to marry would make you more human, more suitable to lead the bank. And you decided to turn that into an opportunity for manipulation. I decided to ensure that when you took full control, we would have a way to influence your decisions." Evelyn looked at Olivia. "Our devoted, indebted, and grateful wife, with a sick sister depending on our goodwill. The perfect arrangement." Olivia felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. All this time, all the threats, all the messages came from the woman who had pretended to be her ally. "The man in the park," she began. "A hired actor," Evelyn completed casually. "A dramatic touch to keep you scared and obedient. Although..." She pursed her lips in disapproval. "You've proven less cooperative than expected. These ridiculous attempts at getting close to Ethan weren't in the script." "They weren't attempts," Olivia whispered. "It was real." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan had leaned on his desk, his face a mask of shock and betrayal. "Why?" he finally asked, his eyes fixed on his mother. "Why all this elaborate manipulation?" "Because you're just like your father, always letting emotions interfere with business. I needed a form of control, a guarantee that the bank would be managed the right way." Evelyn sighed, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "And now that you know the truth, we can set aside the pretenses and work as a true business family." "You're insane," Ethan murmured, incredulous. "No, darling, I'm pragmatic." Evelyn smiled, that cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Now, if you'll excuse me, we have guests waiting. I suggest you dry those tears and return to the party. After all," she opened the door, "we have appearances to maintain." When Evelyn left, the silence that remained in the office was heavy as lead. Olivia and Ethan faced each other, both devastated by the revelation that they had been pawns in a much bigger game than they had imagined. "Ethan," Olivia began, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry. I should have told you." "Not now," he interrupted, his voice hoarse. "We have a party to face." He walked to the door but stopped before leaving. Without turning, he said softly, "The worst part is that, even knowing it started with a lie, what I feel for you is real." Then he left, leaving Olivia alone in the office, her silent tears staining the wedding dress that now seemed more like a shroud than a symbol of happiness. The days following the wedding were an exercise in pretense. To the outside world, Ethan and Olivia were the perfect couple. The powerful banker and his young wife, starting their life together in the luxurious Upper East Side penthouse. For the bank employees, for society, for the press, everything was exactly as it should be. But inside the apartment, the silence was deafening. Olivia had moved into the guest room, turning it into her refuge. The nights were long, filled with thoughts about how everything had gone so wrong. During the day, she continued going to work at Bloomingdale's, now as Olivia Morgan, receiving curious looks and whispered comments from the employees. Ethan, in turn, immersed himself in work with an almost obsessive intensity. He left before dawn and returned late at night, avoiding any possibility of encounter beyond what was strictly necessary. It was on one of these nights that Olivia found him in the library, a half-empty glass of whiskey in his hand. "I'm sorry," she murmured, backing away. "I didn't know you were here." "Stay," he said, his voice hoarse from fatigue and drink. "We need to talk eventually." Olivia hesitated for a moment before entering. The library, which was once their shared space of comfort, now seemed charged with tension. "How's Sophie?" he asked, surprising her. "Well," The treatment is working. She sat in the armchair opposite him. Your mother. She kept her word about that, at least. Ethan laughed humorlessly. Of course she did. She needs to keep you under control. Ethan, Why didn't you tell me? He interrupted, finally looking into her eyes. When you realized there was something between us, why didn't you trust me? Olivia felt tears forming. I was afraid. Not just for myself, but for Sophie, your mother. She knew exactly how to manipulate me. And now? Now? She wiped away a tear that escaped. Now I realize I should have risked it. That maybe, if I had trusted you, we would have found another solution, he completed softly. The silence that followed was different from the previous ones, less accusatory, more contemplative. You know what's ironic? Ethan finally said, placing the glass on the table. My father included that clause in the will because he wanted me to find something real. He always said I was too focused on numbers, too distrustful of people. And in the end, I found something real, but it was poisoned from the start. He stood up, walking to the window. My own mother. She turned his last wish into a tool for manipulation. Olivia also stood up, taking a hesitant step in his direction. What are we going to do now? Now? He turned to face her. Now we're going to give my mother exactly what she wants. What do you mean? We're going to play the perfect couple. We'll attend events, smile for photos, do everything exactly as she planned. A determined smile appeared on his lips. And meanwhile, we're going to find out exactly what she's hiding. At the bank. Olivia blinked, surprised. You think there's more? I'm sure of it. My mother wouldn't set up this whole scheme just to control me. There's something bigger at stake, something she doesn't want me to discover when I take full control. And how can we find out? Ethan took a step towards her. You still work at Bloomingdale's? Yes, but Bloomingdale's is one of the companies the bank uses for special operations. I'm almost certain my mother chose you not just for the convenient story, but also for your position there. Olivia felt a shiver of understanding. You want me to investigate from the inside? No. He took another step, dangerously close. I want us to investigate together, as it should have been from the beginning. Her heart raced at the proximity. You still trust me? Trust is a strong word at the moment. His hand rose hesitantly, almost touching her face before falling. Again. But I believe you were also a victim, and more than that, I believe in what happened between us, even if it started with a lie. Olivia felt her breath falter. Ethan. No, he interrupted her softly. Not now. First, we need to clean up this mess. Then we can figure out what's real between us. At that moment, a noise at the door made them separate quickly. Evelyn entered the library as if she owned the place, which Olivia reflected bitterly. She probably considered she did. Ah, good to see you together, she smiled her calculated smile. I was just coming to remind you about tomorrow's dinner. With the bank's board, it's Olivia's first official appearance as Mrs. Morgan. We'll be there, Mother, Ethan replied, his voice perfectly controlled. Olivia just showed me the dress she chose. Evelyn nodded, satisfied. Excellent. Oh, and Olivia, dear. Sophie called me earlier. The doctor is very optimistic about her response to the new treatment. The veiled threat was crystal clear. Olivia forced a smile. Thank you for taking care of that, Evelyn. After she left, Ethan and Olivia exchanged a meaningful look. The game had begun, but now they would play together, against a common adversary. Tomorrow, Ethan murmured, we start investigating, but we have to be very careful. Olivia nodded, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. Your mother is dangerous. Yes, he agreed, but she made a crucial mistake. Which one? She underestimated us. She thought she could manipulate us indefinitely. That fear and guilt would keep us under control. He smiled, a smile that reminded of the old Ethan, determined, focused, dangerous. She forgot that sometimes people find strength precisely in what should break them. Olivia felt a shiver of anticipation. The man before her was no longer just the victim of Evelyn's manipulations. He was a predator, preparing to counterattack. And she realized with a mixture of awe and excitement, would be his partner in this hunt. When she left the library that night, Olivia felt something she hadn't experienced since before the wedding. Hope. Not just of uncovering the truth about Evelyn and the bank, but also about her feelings for Ethan, feelings that, despite all the lies and manipulations, had become the only truth she could still cling to. The dinner with the bank's board was exactly as Olivia had imagined, formal, pompous, and suffocating. Seated next to Ethan at the long dining table in New York's most exclusive restaurant, she maintained a polite smile while observing the interaction of those present. Evelyn, of course, dominated the conversation with her usual calculated elegance, but it was in the small details that Olivia began to notice interesting things, how the CFO tensed whenever certain operations were mentioned, or how the most senior board member avoided looking directly at Evelyn. "So, Olivia," one of the board members addressed her, "how are you adapting to life as a banker's wife?" "It's been a fascinating experience," she replied, feeling Ethan's hand gently squeeze her knee under the table, their agreed signal, "especially learning about the workings of the bank. Bloomingdale's has such a long-standing partnership with you." Evelyn quickly interrupted, "Oh, but let's not talk business now, Olivia dear. Tell everyone about the penthouse redecorating project." The rest of the dinner followed this pattern. Whenever the conversation approached certain subjects, Evelyn skillfully changed course. But to attentive eyes, each diversion was a clue. Back in the car, Ethan drove in silence while Olivia consulted the notes on her phone. "Alexander Hayes," she said quietly. "The CFO. He almost spilled his wine when they mentioned the operations in Central America." Ethan nodded. "And did you notice how my mother changed the subject when you mentioned Bloomingdale's?" "Yes, there's something there." "There certainly is." He made an unexpected turn. "Let's take a detour." 20 minutes later, they were in the empty Bloomingdale's office. As a manager, Olivia had 24-hour access to the building. What Evelyn didn't know was that in recent weeks, she had started paying more attention to certain files. "Here," she said, accessing the system, "all transactions with Morgan Bank over the last 5 years." Ethan leaned over her shoulder, his familiar cologne momentarily distracting her. "Look for anything related to the Panamanian holding company Alexander mentioned." They worked in silence for almost an hour, cross-referencing data and looking for patterns. It was Olivia who found the first concrete clue. "Ethan, look at this. Bloomingdale's made a series of imports from Central America over the last 3 years. The declared values are absurdly low for the volume." "Money laundering," he murmured, "using the bank's partner companies to—" A noise in the hallway made them freeze. Footsteps were approaching. Ethan quickly turned off the monitor, while Olivia grabbed her purse. They slipped out through a side door seconds before the security guard made his rounds. In the car, adrenaline made them laugh nervously. "That was—" Olivia began. "Dangerous? Reckless? Exciting," she completed, and their gazes met for a moment loaded with tension. Ethan was the first to look away. "We need to be more careful. If my mother finds out—" "I know," Olivia sighed. "How's the other side of the investigation going?" "Jack is tracking the documents we found in my father's safe. There are records of meetings with a lawyer in the weeks before the will." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Olivia gathered the courage to ask the question that had been tormenting her. "Ethan, what if your mother is involved in something more serious than we imagine?" He parked the car in the penthouse garage before answering. "Then we'll have to be prepared for the consequences." In the elevator, they remained silent, but there was a new tension between them. No longer the uncomfortable tension of recent days, but something more primitive, more urgent. When the doors opened, Evelyn was waiting for them in the living room. "Interesting night drive?" she asked, her casual tone contradicting the sharp gleam in her eyes. "Showing the city to Olivia," Ethan responded smoothly. "She still doesn't know all the tourist spots." "At 11 p.m.? It's the best time to see the city lit up, Olivia commented, forcing a smile. Evelyn studied them for a long moment. Well, since you're developing such intimacy, perhaps it's time we discuss the future. The board is eager to see Ethan take on more responsibilities at the bank. Of course, Mother. Tomorrow we can… No, darling. Now. Evelyn gestured to the sofa. Sit down. We have much to discuss. As they sat, Olivia felt her phone vibrate. A message from Jack. Found something urgent, don't trust. The message ended abruptly there. When she tried to check again, the phone had no signal. Oh, the reception up here is terrible sometimes, Evelyn commented casually, a small device visible in her hand. Now let's discuss how things are going to work from here on out. Ethan and Olivia exchanged a quick glance. The game had changed, and they had just discovered that Evelyn was several steps ahead. You really thought I wouldn't be monitoring your every move? Evelyn asked, her smile now openly predatory. Darlings, you have much to learn about how power really works. She poured herself a glass of wine, taking a small sip before continuing. Now let's discuss what you found at Bloomingdale's and why that was a terrible mistake. Evelyn circled the room like a teacher about to give an important lesson, the wineglass in her hand completing the image of absolute control she so prized. You know, she began, your father had a very romantic view of business, Ethan. He believed in outdated concepts like business ethics and social responsibility. She paused, taking a sip of wine. It took a lot of work to correct his mistakes over the years. What kind of mistakes? Ethan asked, his voice controlled, though Olivia could feel the tension in his body beside her on the sofa. International expansion through tax havens, strategic partnerships with companies like Bloomingdale's for fiscal optimization, the kind of operation that transformed Morgan Bank into the giant it is today. Evelyn smiled. Your father never understood that sometimes you need to bend some rules to achieve greatness. Bend rules? Ethan stood up, his composure finally breaking. You're talking about money laundering, tax evasion. I'm talking about business, darling, the real world, not the fairy tale your father wanted you to believe in. Olivia watched the interaction, her mind working quickly. Something in the story didn't fit. That's why Mr. Morgan changed the will, she said suddenly. He found out. Evelyn's smile faltered for a moment. Perceptive, dear. Yes, Richard discovered some of our special operations, but instead of confronting me directly, he decided to use the will as a way to protect Ethan. What do you mean? Ethan asked. The marriage clause was never about making you find love, son. Evelyn laughed softly. It was a way to buy time. Your father knew you would meticulously investigate any potential wife, that you would take as long as possible to accept the arrangement. Enough time for the evidence he gathered to reach the authorities. What evidence? The ones your dear investigator Jack was about to find before suffering that unfortunate car accident 2 hours ago. Olivia felt her blood run cold. Jack's interrupted message. What did you do? Ethan advanced towards his mother but stopped when two men emerged from the shadows of the hallway. Nothing irreparable, darling. Jack is in the hospital, very well cared for. As long as you cooperate, he'll continue to receive the best treatment. Just like my sister, right? Olivia stood up, anger replacing fear. You manipulated all of us from the beginning. Manipulated. Evelyn seemed genuinely offended. I gave opportunities. You, a store manager with no future, became a Morgan. Your father, Ethan, was too weak to do what was necessary. I built this empire. At what cost? Ethan asked quietly. At the necessary cost, Evelyn replied coldly. And now you have a choice to make. You can join me, assume your roles in this family, and enjoy all the benefits, or… The sound of sirens cut through the night, getting closer and closer. Evelyn frowned. What is that? That, Ethan smiled for the first time that night, is Plan B. As if in a perfectly rehearsed choreography, several things happened simultaneously. The penthouse lights went out, the two security guards were surprised by agents who entered through the back, and the elevator door opened, revealing Jack, pale but very much alive, accompanied by federal agents. How? Evelyn staggered, dropping the wineglass. You weren't the only one monitoring our movements, Mother, Ethan explained as the police advanced. Every secret meeting at Bloomingdale's, every discovery about the bank's operations, everything was carefully planned to keep you confident, distracted. But Jack's accident? A necessary theater, Jack said, approaching. We needed you to feel safe enough to confess, which you just did with several witnesses and recordings. Evelyn looked at Olivia, who had moved closer to Ethan. You planned this together. Not from the beginning, Olivia answered softly. But when we discovered the truth about your manipulations, we realized there was only one way to end this together. As the police read Evelyn her rights, Ethan turned to Olivia. His eyes carried a mixture of sadness and relief. I'm sorry for doubting you at first, he said quietly, and I'm sorry for not trusting you sooner. She gently touched his face. But I think we needed to go through all of this to discover what really matters. And what would that be? The truth. Not just about the bank or your mother, but about us. About how something that started as a lie turned into the truest thing we've ever experienced. Ethan pulled her close, finally allowing all the barriers between them to fall. So, what do we do now? Olivia smiled for the first time without fear or guilt. Now we start over. No lies, no manipulations. Just us discovering together what this love can be. In the weeks that followed, many things changed. Evelyn's scheme was exposed. The bank underwent a complete restructuring under Ethan's new leadership, and all illegal operations were dismantled. Jack recovered completely and continued as Ethan's right-hand man, now in the task of transforming Morgan Bank into an ethical and transparent institution. Sophie continued her treatment, now at a different but equally excellent clinic. And as for Olivia and Ethan, they decided to keep the marriage, but this time on their own terms. They renewed their vows in an intimate ceremony, only with people who really mattered. The penthouse library continued to be their special place, but now it was filled with genuine laughter and honest conversations. And on nights when they contemplated the city from the terrace, they reflected on how sometimes you need to go through storms to find the light. In his office at the bank, Ethan kept framed the last letter from his father, found among the evidence that Jack recovered. In it, Richard Morgan had written, "Son, if you're reading this, it's because you've finally found someone who helped you see beyond the numbers, someone who, even amid lies, brought truth to your life. This was my true wish in the will, not a forced marriage, but a chance for you to discover that there are things more valuable than money and power." And Ethan discovered that his father was right. In the end, the greatest legacy wasn't the bank or the fortune, but the ability to transform even the worst circumstances into opportunities for true love to flourish. Dear readers, Olivia and Ethan's journey shows us that sometimes fate has different plans than we imagine. If this story of love, redemption, and truth touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like. In the comments, tell us, have you ever experienced a situation where a lie turned into a deeper truth? What city are you following us from? We have many more exciting stories waiting for you on our channel. Stay with us on this adventure through the world of the deepest feelings of the human heart.